the forms of things, right? And, we're not pronouncing it like Moses, and we're not pronouncing it probably like a person in Israel today, really, either. I mean, we have an accent, and it's a seminary accent, right? But we're okay with that. So, all right, let me just encourage you as well, when you're studying, that it is very helpful, amazingly helpful to have a study partner. So really, whatever you need to do to get together with somebody. Now, I know, living distances away. Where do you live?
I live in Kaiser, but I live in Portland.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But if there's any way you can do it, it'll just make it a lot easier for you, because that kind of interaction, especially when we get to translating, because if you can cut the load, maybe it doesn't cut in half if you have two people translating, but it should cut it by at least a third. That's a very big help, and it probably will cut the load in half from the standpoint of just being able to interact, and certainly cuts the burden in more than half if you can do it with somebody, unless they're a pain in the neck. But it makes it go easier. So studying with somebody is extremely useful to do. Even if the only way you can do that is come an hour or two early on Monday, if the church is open, or meet at Dairy Queen or something, and grab some time to get together. That would be useful. Okay, we are on chapter 3. Does anybody have a pencil? Yeah, that's great. You know what I need to do real quickly? I have next one. I need to take a look. I'm marked in the. We're going to do chapter 3, so turn there. I'm marked in this version, Wayne's copy, what chapters we do when. I need to get that out of there. It's on this syllabus, but for next time. Most days we're going to do 2 chapters a night. There are some when we only do 1. Well, you know that from the syllabus, I suppose. All right. All right, who'd like to open us in prayer tonight?
I just want to give us time to come and study. All things we teach us your truth and help us, Lord, learn this language so we can know your truth even better. Know your word better. Help us as we try to memorize and learn and absorb all the information. May it be honored and helpful.
All right, now we're going to go through a whole lot of rules through these chapters, and you have to relax about that, because really, remember, ultimately we're looking at recognition. We're not looking at reproducing. You're not going to have to sit down and write a paragraph in Hebrew, so that you have to know all the rules for, or remember what happens with vowel points and the rules for those, and how to spell and all that sort of thing. And I'm not even going to ask you, king, and you have to write Melech. I'm going to ask you Melech, and you have to write king. Now, if you have trouble spelling in English, we have other issues. But you don't have to worry about... some of you didn't laugh about that. Maybe there are issues. But I'm a terrible speller, but I can do king. I'm okay with that. Also, what you have to remember in a situation like this is that you have to relax. Once in a while you have to go like that with your shoulder. So practice that. Do that with your shoulder. You have to relax. Now, I'm not saying you don't work hard at it, But you can't let yourself seize up, because if you see all this stuff and seize up, you're toast, right? So you gotta work hard at it, but you gotta stay relaxed to some extent, right? And remember, it's going to be review and going over it again and again and again, if possible on something close to a daily basis. I would rather have you spend 5 minutes a day on Hebrew than an hour once during the week. Now, you're going to have to spend more than 5 minutes a day, don't get me wrong. But, you're way better off to break it up. Even if you spend less time in chunks, you're better off doing that than trying to do it all at once. And, you just have to, it's just a thing where it's just like trying to plow a really hard field. Now, you may be, a language savant or something like that who's just going to come. I'm not. I've always had to work really hard at getting this stuff. So it's like plowing a really hard field, and the first time you go down the row, you look back and you see a scratch in the dirt. And if you leave it very long, the wind comes along, you don't see the scratch anymore, right? You got to go plow that same row again, and make it a little deeper every time. Every time it gets an inch deeper. And you start moving down the rows, and pretty soon you got to go back. Once you get 10 rows down, you got to go back to that first row. Because if you don't go back to it, what's going to happen? It's going to get filled in, and it'll be gone, right? Now at some point, you're going to get that row deep enough so that it's not going anywhere, right? But how many times will you will have had to forgot? How many times will you have had to have forgotten, or something like that? I don't know. How would you say that? How many times do you have to forget something before you really have it? It may be something like 8 or 9 times actually. And it's probably different for everybody. Well, I don't know that you necessarily have to forget it, but you're going to have to review it that many times before you really have it. So remember, it's a process of going over, reminding yourself. When you go through these chapters, you can't just read these chapters. The thing to do is to read them in a way where you're paying attention and you're trying to remember what you're reading. There are going to be forms and things that we need to go back to. That's a different thing. But when you're reading these things, stop every once in a while and review in your mind what you've just been over. That's really hard to do because you want to make progress. We're all wired to make progress. We're wired to get to the end of the chapter, right? But force yourself to stop and say, now, what were the rules for the Shavah? What were the rules for, closed and open syllables and stuff like that, right? So force yourself as you're going through it, and you'll go through it more than once, I hope, but force yourself to go through it and stop and review. Remember that for translation, too. Because you translate verse 1, and you're all excited. You did it. You translated it down. You translated it. You wrote it down. You got the translation. And now, everything in you says, every fiber in your being says, now go to verse 2. And so you do. And you translate verse 2, and you're really excited about that. And you got it down. And by that time, you got up ahead of steam. There's almost nothing going to stop you from going right on to verse 3. So you hit verse 3. Well, by the time you get to verse 3, you better come back at least once to verse 1. Right? And come back. And this is even, I think, more true with Hebrew maybe than Greek because it's so different, especially in the beginning. Go back to verse 1, retranslate it. And if you can say, see, well, I could do it. Well, good. That's what you want. Don't be surprised if you find out, oh, I forgot what that one word is. What is that one word again? Right? And again, it's just working it in. Another way you can look at it is, working in lotion. All right? Got a big blob of lotion. It's on your hand, but it isn't with it yet. Right? You're going to have to, in a little while, it'll be with you. You put a big blob of lotion on your hand and grab something, you just lost your lotion, right? Put the lotion on, work it in. Now you can grab something, you maybe only lose a little bit of it. It's like that. That's the process. Okay, the process is not, oh, okay, I've done chapter 3, learn those endings, move on, never worry about that again. It's not like that. It's all cyclical, coming back to it over and over and over again. Right? So that's the process. You need to be aware of that and be ready for the review aspect of it. All right, chapter 3. I'm sure that there's not meant to be humor here, but if you can pronounce syllabification, then you're doing very well. Syllabification and pronunciation. Some of these grammars can use some pretty big words, can't they? All right, so the 2 rules for syllabification are, number 1. Now remember, I'm assuming that you're working through these chapters on your own. And if you have questions, jot them down in the margin or something like that, and we'll talk about it. Every syllable must begin with one consonant and have only one vowel. So when you look at a Hebrew word, you want to know how many syllables it has. It has to begin with a consonant, always begins with a consonant, and always has at least one vowel. All right. Secondly, there are only 2 types of syllables, open and closed. An open syllable ends with a vowel. A closed syllable ends with a consonant. So in the word davar, there are 2 syllables. They both begin with a consonant, because that's the rule. Dalet, da, and var, the bait. Now, da is open or closed? Open, right? Doesn't end in a consonant. Now, typically, not always, a closed syllable will have to have 2 consonants, right? So var, var is open or closed? Closed. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward, right? Yeah.
Here it says every syllable must have only one vowel.
Mm-hmm.
And you said at least one. Is that, are there sometimes more than one vowel?
Well, there is a diphthong that we'll talk about. But one vowel is basically the rule. A diphthong kind of is 2 sounds working together. Wow, must be something important on that page that's stuck together. All right, Hebrew accents. Hebrew words are usually accented on the last syllable. In our textbook, the textbook is not going to put an accent on unless the accent occurs on other than the last syllable. So that's normal. Normal is for the accent to occur on the last syllable. Here, the book is not going to actually give you an accent mark. So you see in that the first word that we see in Hebrew in paragraph 3.3, davar, there's no accent, so the accent is davar. It's not davar, it's davar. Right? But when you get to Sefer, book, down below, the accent is on the first syllable. So they give you that little arrow thing over the samek. You see that there? That's how they indicate accent in this book. Now, when you look in your Hebrew Bible, every word will have an accent. And it'll be in the right place. And it will be a disjunctive accent or a conjunctive accent. And it'll be a strong one or a weak one. We'll talk about that. But every word will have an accent mark on it in your Bible, not in the textbook. So if there's not an accent mark in the textbook, assume that the accent's on the last syllable of the word.
The accent, so in our Bible,
aren't necessarily going to look like the accent that you see.
Talk about the differences, what they look like in our Bible versus what they look like in the book.
Well, generally, if you can see what they look like in the book there. We'll turn our Bible again to Genesis 1:1, and generally, if it's not a vowel point, it's an accident. It's an accent. Sometimes it is an accident. So you see the very first word there, Bereshit. Now you know what vowel points look like. So under the Beit is a what? Shaval. Under the Resh is a Sere, which makes the Aleph quiescent. We're going to talk about that, right? Silent. And then you have to look closely. I have to get down way low in my progressive lenses to see this. That is a Hirik Yod, right? But that slash by the Hirik that almost makes it look like a commas, right? Is the accent mark. And that's on the last syllable, isn't it? Right? So Bereshit. And then the next accent you see on the next word, Bereshit, Bara. See that little, looks like a little piece of angle iron right there by the commas? Right? That's an accent. Now, I don't have memorized what accents are, all of them, what's what. But I do know that, see, Elohim, again, final syllable, see that little caret pointing up sort of thing? That generally indicates, that's a disjunctive accent, it generally indicates about the middle of the verse. So that's a break in the middle of the verse. So that's one that is good to kind of denote. So here we go. This is going to say, in the beginning, God created. And then the finishing of that sentence is, the heavens and the earth. So that's how the accenting goes in that verse.
So that disjunctive that arrow pointing up actually breaks the verse, not the word.
Yeah.
You don't say middle of the word.
Hmm. Yeah, it's in the middle of the word, but it's kind of like puts a comma after. Not really a comma. And you wouldn't put a comma in your translation, but, you know, in terms of accenting. If we were in poetry, that might be, you know, a line break or something like that. But it can help you. It can help you in your interpretation. Now, remember, this is not original to the original text, right? This is Masoretic, so these vowel points and accents are commentary on the text, right? But they're pretty good commentary, pretty ancient. You know, 1,000 years or so. Yes, question.
Are those circles there to tell us something?
Yeah, don't worry about those circles. Those have to do with the notes and stuff. Things you see over on the left-hand column and stuff like that. Or, yeah, I think that's what it is. All kinds of little notes that are really hard to read and see on the left-hand column that you're not really going to worry about hardly ever. So that's what the accents look like in the biblical text. Mm-hmm.
On the first word, on that Shabbat, that's not a silent Shabbat.
Nope.
Oh, that's why it's there, not forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you're not going to basically ever have two consonants pronounced. Generally, not going to have two consonants pronounced together. So you're not going to have a BR sound in Hebrew. That's not a hard and fast rule, but generally. And we're going to learn the rules of the Shavah here in a minute, and we're going to learn that, you know, because of the rules of Shavah, that's got to be a vocal Shavah. Another question?
Why does sandwich so very dry?
Pardon?
Why is the sandwich so very dry?
Oh, those things are like paragraph markers, and you see them. Like if you turn the page, well, don't turn the page, just stay here. A samek would be a major paragraph marker or section marker, and you can see like in right before verse 6, there's a pay. It's stuck out there. That's a paragraph marker. Or, I don't know if paragraph is the right word, but there's just kind of some sort of a chunk marker, chunk of text. You can see it. You can see it again in that blank spot under the beginning of verse 8 or after verse 8. You can see another pay there. And you can see one almost at the bottom of the page in the middle there before verse 14. So those are just kind of like
right, like where you were at there, verse 14. Looks like a colon before the pay.
Yeah, that's a saluk sok pasuk, and that is the strongest disjunctive accent, basically a period. So you see that the colon thing, And in the letter or the vowel before it, see the vertical line going up and down? That's all part of the same accent. And so you see that? That's the end of a sentence. All right? So that's what the accents look like in the text, how they work in the... he's not going to want to put accents on everything, in here. So just to make it easier to create a textbook, they're going to give you, that one accent mark that looks like that, and it's going to be only one that's other than the last syllable being accented. Okay. All right. Syllable classification. You have the tonic syllable. That's the syllable that's accented. The pretonic syllable is the one that comes before that. And the pro-pretonic syllable is the one before that, basically. In Greek, we had the ultima, right? The last syllable. So on. Yeah. Penultimate, antepenultimate, all that kind of stuff. Last syllable, second to last syllable, third to last syllable. Well, here, that's not what we're talking about. It's not related to the last syllable necessarily, and often it is the last syllable, but it's the syllable of accent, of stress. So the tonic syllable is the syllable of stress. So in the word safer, which is the tonic syllable, the first syllable, say-fer. Now, so is there a pretonic syllable in that word? No. Is there a pro-pretonic? Obviously not. But in the word davar, var, the second, is the tonic syllable. So is there a pretonic syllable? Yes, da. Is there a pro-pretonic syllable? Not a long enough word to have the pro-pretonic syllable. All right. Doggish and syllabification. You will remember, chapter 2, that the Begad Kafat consonants can take a doggish lane, hardening of the sound of the consonant. And all consonants, except the gutturals and rays, can take a doggish forte, a doubling of the consonant. So basically, if you have a doggish forte, it's going to double the consonant. And so the syllable is going to break between the two consonants that are doubled. See? And so how is he going to do that? If you look at the bottom of that paragraph 3.5, toward the right, you can see this word ata, which means you. If he's going to show the syllabification of it, he does that with that vertical line, see? But he's added a tav there in gray type, kind of a ghost sort of thing, right? He still has the doggish forte and the tav next to it, but that's showing that the syllable breaks really between the doubling of the tav. So at, ta, if you said it real slowly. At, ta. So you need to be able to distinguish between a doggish lane and a doggish forte, because a doggish lane is not doubling the letter. It's in the Begad Kafat letters, it's just potentially changing the sound of the letter, right? And for us, we don't change the sound of all the letters that are Begad Kafat. So look at the bottom of the page, and here's some rules for the dogashim. The doggish in a Begad Kafat is forte if preceded by a vowel. So that's fairly straightforward. This is the Begad Kafat letter, the tav, right? Begad Kafat letter. Is that a doggish lane or a doggish forte? Well, it's a doggish forte because it's preceded by a vowel. Now, the doggish in a Begad Kafat is lane preceded by a consonant. So, in the word, for example, mal-ka, the kaf with the doggish, preceded by the lamed with the silent shava. So, since there's a silent shava that's not preceded by a vowel, so that doggish is a doggish lane. It's not doubled right there. See, that kaf isn't doubled. All right. A Begad Kafat letter at the beginning of a word takes doggish lane unless the previous word ends in a vowel. So the davar is going to be a doggish lane. If the previous word ends in a vowel, then it could be a doggish forte, or would be a doggish forte. Okay, any questions on the dogish then? So if you see a dogish in any letter that's not a begad kafat letter, it's always dogish forte. End of story. Because the dogish lane only occurs in the begad kafat letter. Right? Pe, gimel, daled, kaf, pe, taf. So the only question is when you see a dogish in a begad kafat letter. Okay? So if there's a vowel before it, what does that mean? Dogish forte. If there's not a vowel before it, it's a dogish lane. Okay? In either case, it hardens the pronunciation of the letter. So it's not the end of the world if you can't tell whether something is a dogish forte or a dogish lane. Not the end of the world. You're not going to stand in the pulpit and prove to the congregation that you can syllabify a Hebrew word. All right? That's really not of that great a concern to us to know the syllables of a Hebrew word. We want to know what it means. We need to be able to pronounce it. And if you see a dogish and it's a begad kafat letter, and it needs to change the sound of the letter, change it. A bait is not va, but ba with a dogish. And a pay is not but with a dogish. But familiarize yourself with that principle. If there's a vowel before the dogish, it's got to be a dogish forte. All right, the shava and syllabification. Rule number 1: the shava is silent if it is immediately preceded by a short vowel. So the shava is silent if it is immediately preceded by a short vowel. Now, let's just remind ourselves of what that means. Pop over to the vowel page, which is about page 10. How are we going to do this? Well, here's how I suggest you do it. The long vowels, if there's a mixture between a vowel and a consonant, that's going to be an unchangeable long vowel. Right? You have a reduced vowel, that's a combination too, right? So all the combinations are not short vowels. Okay? Long vowels that are by themselves: comets, sere, and holum. Remember those three: comets, sere, holum. Any other vowels by themselves are short. So if you can remember comets, sere, and holum as long vowels, then the rest of them are short.
Can I ask you a question about those on the vowels?
Mm-hmm.
On the unchangeable long vowels, so let's say you have a common take, did you have like a common take?
Say it again now?
Did you have a common take or a common state? Or, what's the significance about common state as opposed to common yield?
Well, that's just how they occur. You're not going to have a common yield.
Spelling the letter G common should be a bait next to a yod. It's top under it.
Yeah, typically, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's given you, and there are always exceptions to rules, but it's given you your basic possibilities there. Yeah.
Is there a difference between comment and teaching and just plain old comment?
Uh-huh.
They
They look the same, but there's difference in pronunciation, and we'll get to that in this chapter. It's a great question. About to get there. All right. So shava is silent if immediately preceded by a short vowel. So this word malka, we have a short vowel that precedes the shava, right? So it's going to be silent. So malka. It's not malaka. It's malka. Right? Not very often, the syllable that has the Shava is open or closed. Closed. Very good. And very often, the silent Shava will be at the end of a closed syllable. Right? All right. You can see some of the examples that he gives you. Interesting to look at that word under letter A. What word is that under letter A? Can you pronounce it? Pretty close. Yeah. Well, that's what it is. Yeah. It's got a dogish in the pay because the God Kafat letter beginning a word, right? So the pay would be pronounced with a P sound. So it is paro. What does it mean? Pharaoh. Right? Of Egypt, kind of thing. A little bit of an odd word. It's obviously not from a Hebrew origination, right? And so it's a little bit odd in its spelling, and it has 4 letters instead of 3, and that's why. All right. Number 2, the Shava is vocal if not immediately preceded by a short vowel. Now you just have to get used to recognizing that. But if the Shava is preceded by a short vowel, it's silent. If the Shava is not preceded by a short vowel, it's vocal. So, what does that mean? That you just give it a short, like sound. Like in the beginning, the very first word of the Bible. Bereshit. Bereshit. That's how you say that. Right? And so that's how we know that Shava on the Beit, in that first word of the Bible, is vocalized. How do you know? Because it's not preceded by a short vowel. Now, if it's on the front of the word, it can't be preceded by a short vowel, right? So a Shava on the front of the word is going to be a vocalized Shava. And that's letter A under number 2. Initial Shava is always vocal, as in Barakah. Now, you'll just curl up in front of the fireplace with this, and, you've probably already done that. Just digest it and get to know it and become friends with it, right? But, in a sense, it's somewhat simple because if there's a short vowel, not comets, not Cupid, no, comets, Tsere, and holum, right? All the other vowels by themselves, Sigol, comets, Ketuf, all of those, right? Those are the short vowels. So if the Shava is preceded by a short vowel, it's silent. Other cases, it's vocal. That's all. Just let that come in and live inside you for a while. I'm sure that some of it doesn't seem very significant because you don't really understand where it's all going right now, right? And the fact of the matter is, this stuff that we're talking about now is not the most significant stuff that you'll be learning this term. If you can't really decide whether a Shava is vocalized or not, now if you get together for coffee in 10 years with another pastor who went to a different seminary and you happen to be pronouncing Hebrew words and you can't pronounce it, you might be embarrassed and he might make you pay for coffee or something like that, right? But in terms of the meaning of the word, and what you're going to preach or teach, because you're preaching and teaching in English, it's really not going to make any difference in that way. Now, it is kind of cool to be able to pronounce things right, you know what I mean? But apart from that, it's not monumental. All right, now to your question, Kimberly. Comets and Comets Ketuf, page 21. Here we go. You already know from section 2.2 that 2 vowels look exactly alike. Comets, a changeable long A, and the Comets Ketuf, a short O. How do you tell the difference? In general, the comets occurs much more frequently than the Comets Ketuf. So when in doubt, defer to the comets. Since, however, this method is not error-free, well, in that case, you'd never have a comet skatoop if you think about it, right? So you kind of need to know how to tell them apart. So the comet skatoop, the O sound, occurs only in a closed, unaccented syllable. So now we need to know the difference between an open and a closed syllable, right? That's pretty easy. An open syllable ends in a vowel, and a closed syllable ends in a consonant. So a closed syllable is going to have two consonants, generally speaking. Right? An open syllable is going to have one consonant. So this word, chokmah, wisdom, has a comet skatoop. Why? Because the first syllable, chet, kaf, is a closed, unaccented syllable. Chokmah, that's how you say that.
I think it's choke, not hawk. For instance, I think a long O is O, short O is.
Now this is the difference between a long A. Now remember, when we're talking about long and short, it's not corresponding to long and short sounds in English. So a long A in English is A, but a comet is a long vowel, but it sounds like ah. But it's a long vowel for our purposes here, for the rules of grammar here, right? What are the long vowels? Comets, sere, polum. I mean the ones that stand by themselves, right? And we need to know that because if you have a short vowel, the shavah after it is what?
It's
Silent. You see, so for those kinds of rules, we need to know whether it's long or short. But just because we say a comet is long in an A-class vowel, doesn't mean it corresponds to a long A in English, which is A. It's still pronounced ah. Okay. Now a comet's katuf, if you would like to try to make a short O sound like the grammar says, as in bottle, and if you want to distinguish between a and ah, that's fine. It's easier for me to make it a longer O sound. So instead of it being chachma, it would be cha bottle, chachma, instead of chachma. That's such a small distinction to me that I lose it. Right? So I'm going to say chokmah. Now, so that's a closed, unaccented syllable, right? The chet, kaf. Get to you in a second. So that comets there is a comet skatoop. Also, the shavah, is it silent or vocal, and why? It's silent. Because comet skatoop is a short vowel. And so since it comes after a short vowel, the shavah is silent. Now, the second syllable is also a closed syllable. Why is that not a comet skatoop?
Because it's a time.
Because it's accented. So a comet in a closed, unaccented syllable will, as a rule, be a comet skatoop. Okay, yes, question.
I'm almost feeling like that. I don't know how to tell the difference when I'm looking at the first syllable of this word between how do you tell that it's closed instead of, say, if the shavah was vocal. It seems like we're relying on the vowels to tell you what the other one is.
Well, I suppose if you know how to say the word, that's what tells you, in a sense. Well, maybe just knowing how to say the word is the main reason you know that. But
There's really nothing there to tell me that
that's a
it's
pretty
not
good question.
Ka.
Well, cha, kama, is a way you could pronounce it otherwise if you broke the syllables up differently. But that's one of the things when you get a ways down to in learning a language, you kind of get a feel for what the normal patterns for the language are. Because the language doesn't use all the possible patterns. Just like you were asking about the vowels, right? There are all kinds of different combinations you could make with those vowels that are just not used in Hebrew. And so what's the normal pattern? Well, the normal pattern would be if you have a word like that, you're going to have, that's going to make a syllable, right? I mean, you can kind of just see that and tell. So maybe knowing how to pronounce the word and just knowing the normal patterns of the language are what help you. And so, in some sense, it becomes a vocabulary issue, and that's why when we get to vocabulary, like at the end of this chapter, being able to pronounce them properly is part of what's important in terms of learning what they are. Otherwise, you might not need me. We wouldn't want that to be the case. All right. As he points out, the most common word where you see a kamatz ketuf is the word kol, which means all or every, each, at the bottom of the number 1 on paragraph 3.7. Number 2, the kamatz prefer. Yes?
Would that be accented?
Well, no, because it probably shares the accent of the word it's around, like some Greek words do. Is that the question you had? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So the kamatz prefers an open pretonic syllable or a closed accented syllable. In the example, davar, both vowels are kamatz. The first is an open pretonic syllable, and the second is a closed accented syllable. Or whatever that's worth. Now, you need to know about the meteg. A small symbol called meteg may also be used to distinguish between kamatz and kamatz ketuf. What happens is sometimes when you have a kamatz in a closed, unaccented syllable, you'd think it would be a kamatz ketuf, right? But it isn't, it's a kamatz. And when that happens, you get a meteg by the kamatz. And so if you have a kamatz with a meteg, you know that you're really dealing with a kamatz and not a kamatz ketuf. All right? So in this word batim, since you have a meteg there, it's not botim, but batim. Now, why is that a closed, unaccented syllable? Because there's a doggish forte in the tav. See that? So that makes it bat team. Now, this stuff, I understand how detailed and overwhelming it is, and it is. Get to know it a little bit. This is not the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be doing. Right? Some of the stuff will just kind of become second nature to you. But again, if you make a mistake with this stuff, it's not going to affect your understanding of the meaning of the text. You understand what I'm saying?
It's kind of like saying tomato or tomato.
Yeah, in a sense, and yet, one of them's a right pronunciation and the other one's a wrong pronunciation. But how often are you going to be standing up in front of anybody reading the Hebrew text? So it's just you can kind of be as particular about this stuff as you want to be, really. You see what I mean? All right. And you do need to be aware of these things, though. I mean, to never have read this chapter, you'd be, missing something in your life, right? So you do need to be aware of these things. And the more you can get these things down, the better. All right, the furtive patak. Now, this you do need to keep in mind. You learn that Hebrew vowels are pronounced after the consonant with which they are associated. There is, however, one minor exception to this rule. When a word ends in chet or ayin, a patak may appear beneath this consonant and must be pronounced and transliterated before the guttural. This special use of the patak is called the furtive patak. So notice the examples. The first example, boreach, is how you would say that. You would not say it borecha. You would say boreach. See that? The next word, noteah, rapia, and the word ruach for spirit.
A question about that. The vav there, when you pronounce the word, you're going to pronounce it like a W or B.
The vav where?
And ruach.
Okay, but that's a shurik. So that's a vowel, isn't it?
Right. I'm trying to put resh, vav, hey, and hey.
Yeah, resh, vav, chet, patak. But the patak gets pronounced before the chet. But the vav is not really a vav. It's a shurik. So, back over to page, is it 10? I think it's 10. Back over to page 10. Right? When we come to our unchangeable long vowels, bottom of page 10, the very last one there is a shurik. Kind of like a holam vav, which sounds like O, but it's different. Shurik sounds like ooh. Right? So a vav, sometimes hey, sometimes yod, sometimes vav can be used as vowels and not consonants.
Now that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, good.
I didn't follow the it actually helps. Thanks.
Yeah. You will get used to this stuff, believe me. It'll become second nature to you. So that's the proper pronunciation of that word is ruach. So you see, that's not a consonant, that vav. It's really a shurik, and you got to pronounce the patak before the chet. Is everybody getting that? Furtive patak. All right, quiescent olive. At least, you're spending all this time and money. At least you can go home and tell your family. Well, we learned about the furtive patak and the quiescent olive, and vocalize the silent shavaz.
That's what my family wants to hear about.
They might not want to see you coming, but they'll be impressed. No? So the quiescent olive, when olive occurs without a vowel, it is quiescent, as in chatat. When the olive is quiescent, it is not considered to be a consonant with reference to the rules of syllabification. This word should be divided, chat, ta. Yes?
Is there a discernible point to a non-Hebrew speaker to having a quiescent olive just sitting there doing nothing?
Well, it's because you probably have added something to the word. For example, this word chat, well, it's there because of spelling issues. It's easier to see if you look at your Bible in Genesis 1:1. Remember the word we had, Bereshit? that comes from the root resh, aleph, sheen, pronounced rosh. The word's quiescent anyway, but that's the root that it's from. So it's silent, in terms of pronunciation, no. From the standpoint of spelling, yes. So it's just like a silent E in English for us, right? If you think of Greek, all the letters are pronounced. And most other languages that I know of, all the letters get pronounced, like German, right? There's no silent E in German. If it's there, you pronounce it. But in English, we have a silent E, like in the word gate, G-A-T-E. Well, what does that do? That makes the A long, so it changes that pronunciation. But the E itself is silent. Well, the aleph here is silent. So it's a spelling issue. So, a native Hebrew speaker would want to see it there because it wouldn't be spelled right otherwise. But in terms of pronunciation, it's not going to make any difference.
Is it like the difference between night and night?
Yeah, to some extent.
We have the horse and the cover of the sky. And
Yeah.
huge distinction with the stone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a spelling issue. Not a pronunciation issue. Because, it could be gone and you pronounce it the same. And in situations like that, sometimes it does find itself gone in a defective kind of spelling. All right. Here's the Hebrew diphthong. What's a diphthong? Two vowel sounds that are said closely together to kind of make one sound. And so here you have the patak and the yod and the hirik that come together, and it sounds like I. So this word shemayim is how you pronounce that. Okay. Shemayim. We saw that word in the first verse of the Bible with an article on it that means heavens, doesn't it? Heaven or heaven. And bayit is how you pronounce that. That's monosyllabic. So that's the diphthong. Patak, yod, hirik. And it's pronounced in that way. Shemayim, ayah, shemayim, bayit. All right. One of the things I like about this grammar is the way they give you the summary at the end. So you can kind of go back and study the summary. So when you get to the end of the chapter, don't skip the summary because it's a summary, right? That's, what we're talking about, review, saying it again and again, right? Do we ever turn the tape on? Oh, good. Okay. We're just going along happily, and at least we have that on. All right. So this is something that's just, you don't really have to work at remembering, I don't think. Every syllable must begin with a consonant and have only one vowel, with few exceptions. There are only two types of syllables, open and closed. Dagesh forte doubles the consonant which it occurs and must be divided in syllabification. A dagesh in begad kafat consonant is lane if preceded by a consonant, and a forte if preceded by a vowel. So circle that, number 4, because that's one you want to come back to and kind of get to know. Okay. So that's how we're going to tell if a dagesh is lane or forte in a begad kafat letter. What if you have a dagesh in another letter besides the begad kafat letter? It's always forte. Okay. So if preceded by a consonant, it's lane. If preceded by a vowel, it's forte. Dagesh forte does the same thing pronunciation-wise in a begad kafat letter as the dagesh lane hardens the sound. The gutturals And Resh cannot take a dagesh at all. A Shava is vocal in the following circumstances. If it occurs under the first consonant of a word, if it is the second of two contiguous Shavas within a word, if it is under any consonant with a dagesh forte, if it is after any long vowel. A Shava is silent in the following circumstances. If it is preceded immediately by a short vowel, if it is the first of two contiguous Shavas within a word, if it is at the end of a word. So, circle number 8. If you remember, remembering number 7 is a good idea too, but if you remember number 8, if you can remember when the Shava is silent, then in other cases it's vocalized, right? A guttural cannot take a vocal Shava, but it can take a silent Shava. That's a good thing to remember. I might even circle number 9 just to remember that. Guttural cannot take a vocal Shava. Okay? Unlike the gutturals, the consonant Resh can take a vocal Shava. The reduced vowels always occur in open syllables. They are never silent. The meteg may be used to distinguish between comets and comets ketuf. The meteg occurs with comets and not with comets ketuf. Remember the meteg. Circle number 12. Furtive patak is not considered to be a full vowel, nor is it counted in syllabification. It must, however, be pronounced and transliterated before the guttural. Remember number 13, but that's not that hard to remember, is it? Once you learn the furtive patak, you pretty much have it. And quiescent aleph, if you see an aleph without a vowel under it, what are you going to do? You're just going to have to, you can't pronounce it, right? It's going to be silent. So, that's not very hard to remember. You're forced into that when you try to pronounce it, right? And syllables that contain the diphthong are considered to be closed, the diphthong, ion kind of diphthong. So, be aware of that. So, of all of these, we have 5 things that you really need to concentrate on and remember from that chapter. Now, the more of that you get, the better, right? But here's the deal. As we go along, you're going to have a whole lot of things that really make a difference to remember and to be concerned about. Right now, it's all about, did we pronounce it right? Because that's where we're at. That's the only thing we really know. Well, when you've got to start parsing verbals and deciding whether it's a finite verb or a participle or an infinitive, and what's going on, is it in construct with some other word or whatever, then those things matter in terms of the meaning and the translation. These things are not as important then as they are today, basically. So while they're important, study them, right? And get to know them. So vocabulary, 312, I'll say the word and you say it after me. Are you ready? Can you see it there on the bottom of page 24? Adam. Adam means man or Adam. Eretz.
Eretz.
Earth, land. And it's feminine. And you'll know why he tells you that after we do the next chapter. Elohim.
Elohim.
God or gods. Normally it's for the true God. Av. Father. El. God. True God or a not true God. Or a high God, El. So El. Remember Amy Grant? El Shaddai. No, that's the word right there. Huh? Bane. Bane. Bane means son. So what do you think Bane Yamin means? Bane Yamin.
Son of Yammer.
So Bain is son. Everybody say Bain.
Bain.
Thank you. Bayit.
Bayit.
House. Davar.
Davar.
Word. Matter. Thing. It's a little bit like logos in Greek, isn't it? Yom.
Yom.
Day. What's the next one you think? Yeah. Seen. It's on the left, so it's seen. Yisrael. Yisrael. Now, is that a comments or a comments ketub?
Let's go comment.
It's a comments because it's not in a closed syllable.
How come is it ish or ish?
Yes.
Yes.
Because the dots on the left making it a seen. If the dots on the right, it's a sheen. Yisrael. All right. What's the next one? Yerushalayim. Remember that diphthong there? All right.
The little arrow squiggly. What makes it a diphthong? Where do you have?
Well, this is a defective spelling. Look, it gives you an alternative form that's not defective in its spelling.
Oh.
You know, common words like that end up getting shortened, spelled shorter, right? That's just human nature, right? So here's the full form, full spelling of Yerushalayim.
Now, is that part of the fall?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we won't do that now.
Oh, I don't know. It's probably just, that's a good question. Is that part of the fall? I don't know. It's inspired, so what does that tell you? Maybe, but God uses, imperfect people and imperfect human language, and it's still inspired. So, I don't know. Maybe it will be spelled in the, in the full way, always in heaven. When you're driving toward Jerusalem in heaven, you'll always have the yod, maybe in the sign. I don't know. That's a great question. All right, Yerushalayim. Say that.
Yerushalayim.
Jerusalem. Next word, Adonai.
Oh, yes, you did trick us.
That's how you pronounce it in Hebrew. How would you pronounce it? Looking at the letters.
I would probably something like that. Yahweh.
Well, you don't get that from the letters that are there. Don't get that from the letters that are there. See, the fact of the matter is, the consonants that are there and the vowel points that are there, it's not pronounceable. And that's on purpose. Why is it like that? Why is it written that way? Because you're not supposed to pronounce it. Right? So when you're reading Hebrew and you come to the divine name, you say Adonai. Okay? If you ever say Yahweh around Jewish people, you'll offend the living tar out of them. Especially if you're reading Bible when you say that. So you will always practice when you're reading Hebrew and come to that word, you will say Adonai. Now, do I say the word Yahweh? Obviously, I've just said it 2 or 3 times. And, I might say that in church and all kinds of things like that. That's fine. I'm not expecting Jewish people to be there. And if they're on my turf, they'll hear me say Yahweh. Right? If I walked into a synagogue, I wouldn't say that, would I? That, as we have it there. Now, scholars have gone back and tried to determine how would that have been pronounced. And again, the vav, now we're pronouncing it in the ancient Hebrew kind of way with a W, right? So that's why we say Yahweh. And so the best guess is that that's how it would have been pronounced. But it's written in your Hebrew Bible. And that's how it would be written in your Hebrew Bible. And it's written there in that way, in an impronounceable way, to remind you not to pronounce it. Yes?
Why do you say it's unpronounceable? It looks pronounceable.
Well, it shouldn't, because there's no vowel under the hey, either hey. And there isn't a vowel, shavah hey. And there is a vowel, you could have a comments hey, but there's not a vowel shavah hey. So that first hey, particularly, is a consonant with no vowel under it. And we don't have a quiescent hey.
So maybe
So you could maybe pronounce it yva, but that.
So it's okay to have a hey without a vowel at the end of a word, but not in the middle? Because there's another one down there in Moses.
Well, but you have a sagol hey, but you don't have a comet. You have a comet hey, you have a sagol hey. You don't ever have a shiva hey. You never have a shiva in combination with a consonant. Remember, all of the logical possibilities are not used with the language. Yes.
I'm assuming that that's some kind of rabbinical determination that that's not pronounced.
Yeah, it's been a long time in Jewish tradition, and it comes from the fact that if you take the name of God in vain, what's the penalty for that?
So that's a rationale for it, because when Moses was said to say who sinned, I'm sure he pronounced it.
Oh, yeah, I think Moses would have said it.
And so
back in those
at the
times.
point where they were putting these vowel markings in, by then they had determined not to do it. But that's not my question.
So it's probably much earlier than that too. Probably way earlier. Probably even during Jesus' time.
Yeah, we don't know, I guess. But my question is, when you see them write in English, they'll put a G-D and so on. Do they do that here, or do they just automatically say Adonai?
They automatically say Adonai. They'll write it.
Will they write it? That's what.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But different scribes will have different rituals, and over time, those rituals change. But different scribes will have different rituals for writing the divine name. Sometimes they will come to it, and once they write the divine name, they'll break the stylus and not use it for another word. Sometimes, when they come to the divine name, they'll get out a new one and always use a new stylus for the divine name. There would be ritual washings associated with, every time it takes a long time to copy the whole Bible when you do stuff like that, right? You come to the divine name, and there would be ritual washings associated, so the scribe would have to, wash his hands or whatever, either before or after, depending on, the tradition.
6,828 times.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's really interesting when you study the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you actually look at facsimiles of the Dead Sea Scrolls, in other words, pictures of them, so you can see the text itself, you can see that the word Yahweh is written in a noticeably different kind of script than the rest of the text. In just older, more ancient kind of letters. So you can just look at the page of Hebrew and almost immediately the occurrences of Yahweh stand out to you because it's written in, it's almost like it looks like it's written in italics. You see what I mean? And the texts kind of tell on the scribes, back to the whole human nature thing, and is it part of the sin nature? If you're going to break your stylus, every time you write Yahweh or have to wash and all that kind of stuff, they kind of got clever, and what they would do is they would write along, and when they came to Yahweh, they would leave a space for it and keep writing. Leave another space when they came to it again. When the page was done, or at some point when they had a bunch of them or whatever the case was, they would go back and do their ritual thing and then write in Yahweh in the space, and sometimes in a different script. Sometimes, they didn't leave the exact perfect space, but you can tell they did that because there are occasions where you find the spaces where Yahweh belongs with no Yahweh written in. And so that tells you that what they were doing is leaving the space. And so that cut down on the amount of work or the styluses that you would go through when you were writing. But that reflects, you see, the respect that they had for the divine name. I think we ought to have the same amount of respect for the divine name. it still says, under the law, if you take the name of the Lord in vain, you will be stoned. You know, now the Jewish tradition is good at fence building, right? Well, if I'm going to be stoned if I take the name of God in vain, I don't want to be stoned, so I can avoid being stoned if I never say it. Well, what a shame to never say the name of God. I don't think God intends that. But we have to know that it's a serious thing to take the name of God in vain. You'll see at the end of this chapter, you may have read that already, about the imperative to praise. And how sometimes you see a shortened form of Yahweh, either just a Yod or a Yah, Yod, Hey. And the end of the word hallelujah, that's really two words, sometimes written as one, the imperative to praise, and a short form of Yahweh. Hallelujah. Now, let me ask you a question. If you say the word hallelujah in vain, are you taking the name of God in vain? I don't know, but I try not to do it. I try not to just go around saying hallelujah flippantly. And why would you anyway, right? So we ought to be careful about that. Pronounce the name of God? Yeah, I think so. A song that says, Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. What song is that? Majesty. I forgot the name of the song. Anyway, I have to sing the whole song to get it, probably. Anybody think of the name of it? Anyway, my church knows that when we come to that, we change that to our Lord Yahweh reigns in majesty.
So, if you're Swedish, like, so did you hear the story, like, Yah? How does that work?
Pretty good.
Better about it from over your head. Dangerously close.
Well, you're actually not. You're saying a different word now, aren't you?
Good to know.
So we could say that we don't really know when they started not pronouncing it.
I don't know if we know. I don't know. I don't really think we know, but I think it is fairly early. I don't think it's as nearly as early as Moses, obviously, but it probably it predates Jesus. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the honor that they gave to the name, that may indicate they're probably not saying it then, 200-300 BC. So I don't think we know when it started. I certainly don't. But before Jesus, it's like Jewish people will not eat dairy and meat together, right? There is a McDavid in Israel where you can get a hamburger, but you cannot get a cheeseburger. Why? Well, basically because it says do not boil a kid that's mother's milk. And from that it's extrapolated, well, we're not going to eat dairy and meat together at all. So they make it a little bit stricter than the biblical text here. So, yes, we'll pronounce that when we're giving it our Hebrew pronunciation, we'll pronounce that Adonai. All right, the next word, Mitzrayim. Now, there's the diphthong there. That means Egypt. And Moshe. Moses.
Did you say that again?
Moshe. Now, you could see this written with only one dot. Why would there only be one dot? Why would the colon be missing in this word? Yeah, because they could. The one dot over the sheen could end up doing double duty for the sheen dot and the holum dot. Right, so it's both a sheen and a holum dot. You could see it written like that. It's not written like that here, just so we know how to pronounce it more easily. Moshe, Melech, king, Sus, horse, Eved, servant, Paro, Pharaoh, Shana, year, shame, name. Yep. And remember, the accent on servant, on Eved, is on the first syllable. Eved. The bait is pronounced like a V because it doesn't have a dogish in it. Eved. Yes? On what?
On the final code in
Melech.
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 Those two dots are they just...
That's a Shavah.
Just a Shavah, just moved
And
over
that,
because
well, that Shavah gets put on that final Kaf often, just as a matter of course. It doesn't have a vowel under it, basically. A Kaf, you'd expect to have a vowel under it, but it doesn't. It's a silent Shavah, basically. So that's a great question. Yes? Question? Any other questions? Okay, so this is your first stab at learning vocabulary. So that's a significant chunk there, and there'll be another chunk in the next chapter for next week. This isn't too hard, though, this vocabulary, is it? I mean, Adam should be fairly easy. Elohim, you probably already know. Yisrael, Yerushalayim, Moshe. That's fairly easy. The trouble with learning Hebrew vocabulary is that it doesn't have a connection to English, really. A couple of words do, like gamal for camel and kinnaman for cinnamon, but other than that, that's about it. When you're doing Greek, you got kephale for head, cephalic, cardia for heart, and on, right? Because there's a great connection between Greek and English because they're in the same language family, right? Indo-European language family. Now this is in the Semitic language family, different language family. So very, very different. Not a lot of connection with English vocabulary and Hebrew vocabulary. So you really have to use mnemonic devices, memory devices, those sorts of things in order to do this. So whatever, sparks for you a memory of that word, use it. Now, Adam, that's pretty easy because we all know Adam, and Adam was the first man, right? So that's not that great of a challenge. Eretz, how are you going to learn Eretz? Well, it kind of sounds like the word arable to me, arable land, so that helps you remember it. Shame. Now, I don't like associating shame with name, but, maybe you'll say, well, you don't have to be ashamed of your name. So, shame and name. I don't know. However you do that, but, I highly recommend you use some tricks like that just to, and they're silly. Like, I remember pakad means to visit because, if you go visit someone you're not careful, you might park odd in front of wherever you're visiting. So it's silly and stupid, Dam means blood. And I remember my Hebrew professor quoting Shakespeare. Oh, damn blood. Can't wash it off. Dam means blood. So you can use Shakespearean things, And I guess you can swear in seminary if you want to. But unless it's on tape. It's different if you're quoting Shakespeare for Hebrew purposes, just for the record. But you got to use those kind of memory aids. You can just learn them straight up, but that's pretty hard by the time you get a few hundred words. It's kind of difficult to do that. All right, good stuff. I like what they put at the end of these chapters. Almost, devotional, grammatical kinds of stuff. Have you read that yet? Pretty good stuff. Wish we could dwell on it, but we don't really have time to do it. The advanced information, that's good to be aware of too. All right. Let's get into this next chapter a little bit, and then we'll take a break. Because you can go away thinking about it. Now we get to the real stuff. This is the cool stuff now, right? This is real language learning stuff now today in chapter 4. We have Hebrew nouns, basics of Hebrew nouns. All right, and so we're using a couple of nouns here. Sus, which is a masculine noun, and Torah, law, Torah, right? Torah as a feminine noun. In Hebrew, you don't have very many duals, really. I mean, there are some, but they're not that many. So basically, you want to concentrate on the singular and the plural, and you'll know the dual. And we only have...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do all duals have diphthongs?
That ending right there.
It's pretty easy.
Yep. So you have singular and plural, masculine and feminine nouns. You're not going to have a neuter noun. We don't have neuter nouns. That's kind of nifty, isn't it? Remember that although there is usually some correspondence, grammatical gender and real gender, or grammatical gender and sex, are, like the sex of a person or something, is not the same thing. Right? Now, there is normally correspondence. I mean, you would expect the word brother to be masculine, and it is, and you would expect the word sister to be feminine, and it is. Oftentimes you can kind of at least surmise a reason why a word is masculine or feminine. Maybe it betrays a perception of a concept. Why is a horse masculine? I don't know, men are horses, I guess. I don't know. Why is Torah law feminine? I don't know if there's really a reason, but it is. Because well,
Someone laid it down.
yeah, there you go. They lay it down, don't they? Well, I wouldn't have said that, but you did, and so then. Kimberly is not laughing.
You don't feel weak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you don't have to laugh. That's tough to do Hebrew when you don't feel very good. All right. So, what are the endings? Well, masculine singular ending is blank. Nothing there. The masculine plural ending is im. Hirik yod, mem. Final mem, by the way, because it's the end of the word, right? So im, and the dual ending obviously is ayim, susayim. So masculine sus, susim, susayim. We'll concern ourselves mostly with knowing blank im, and particularly how to write it, because you need to write it on a quiz, right? For the feminine nouns, the typical ending is a, comets he, and for the plural, ot, and the dual ending is the same, you'll notice, as the masculine. So the masculine and feminine dual ending is the same, ayim. There aren't that many occurrences of that, relatively speaking, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. So the noun endings simply are blank, im, ot. So if you can say that and you can spell that, you're good to go. Any questions on that? Blank, im, ot. There are always exceptions to all of these rules. And the reason we need to have so many rules, plus the exceptions that go with the rules, you know why we need to have so many rules and exceptions?
Descriptive, not prescriptive.
No. It's because if it were easy, everybody would want to be a pastor. And that'd be a mess. Right? Everybody would want to do this if it were easy. So you've gone through, you can see he talks about these endings and various words that they occur with. And so you can see body parts. A lot of our body parts are in pairs, aren't they? So eyes, hands, feet, ears, those sorts of things. There's where you see a lot of your duals right there. Right? And some words are always in the dual, like Shemayim, heaven. is in the dual. And there are a couple others. They'll talk about those in this chapter. If you look at paragraph 4.4, he breaks the endings down. Endingless. I prefer blank. It's much easier to say, right? Blank, eam, oat. There are alternative possibilities for feminine nouns. Patak, tav, segol, tav, hirik, yod, tav, shurik, tav. Right? Now, what's the vocabulary form of a word? What does that mean, vocabulary form? Well, okay, turn back to the end of the last chapter. See that list of vocabulary he gave us? Okay. These are always going to be, well, you can't say always, but typically these are going to be in the singular form, right? Which means for the masculine ones, they're not going to have an ending, right? So Adam is masculine, and it doesn't have an ending. Eretz doesn't have an ending, but it's feminine. And that's why he tells you it's feminine. See? No, I'm not seeing any clearly feminine words here. Yeah, well.
Moses feminine?
No, because that's a segol hay. And segol hay is not one of our options over here. Right? Now, Elohim, is that singular or plural? Plural. Masculine plural, isn't it? Why is it plural? Does it refer to more than one God? Well, it could in some context. But when it refers to the true God, it's what? Yeah, it's a royal we. Plural of majesty. That's what that is. So that's an unusual vocabulary word, because most vocabulary words are going to be in the singular. So if it's masculine, you'll see it without an ending as in the vocabulary form. If it is feminine, you'll see it with its typical ending. So when you learn the vocabulary form, you're going to learn it as having whatever ending is in the singular for the feminine. See that in paragraph 4.4 on the bottom of page 29? See all those endings? Right. You'll learn the vocabulary with those endings. So if we just take a quick look at the vocabulary on page 36 for this chapter, if you look at the fourth one down, that's Isha. You see that? Isha. It means woman or wife. It's feminine, isn't it? Typical feminine ending. But what about Bat? That's daughter, and it's feminine. Now that's got a little bit different form, doesn't it? Derek, if you look down there, Derek, that's a feminine noun, even though it doesn't have an ending. So that's irregular, isn't it? Look at the bottom one, the word Torah. What gender is Torah? Feminine. Okay, good. We'll look at those in a few minutes. So you see how that's working? The vocabulary form is going to be typically the singular form. And if a word is masculine, it's going to be the masculine singular form. If the word is feminine, it's going to be the feminine singular form. So when we talk about vocabulary form, that's the form you're going to see in the vocabulary list. All right? It's also the form that you see as your dictionary entry. So that's important to know. Right? And it's just like it was in Greek. Right? What vocabulary form in Greek is what? Masculine, nominative, singular form of an adjective, or if a noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter, you're going to get that form, but it's always going to be the nominative singular form of the word, right? How many of you are taking Greek in here? Some of you, okay, good. All right, so I'm going to let you go. 15 minutes, okay, for a break? I'm going to let you go thinking about those endings, blank, eam, ot. That's what we'll learn. So I'll ask you next time, write for me the noun endings, and you will write blank in English, right? You will write blank, and you will write eam, hirik, yod, final main. You will write comet, hey, and then you will write ot, cholam vav, tav. Does that make sense? So there you go, the first of the endings. All right, let's take a break and we'll talk more about nouns when we get back together.